Hello, hello. Welcome back to No Me Callo. I Won't Stay Quiet. I'm your host, Jessica Lomelin, and today I want to talk to you about something that has stayed with me for years: the weight of apologizing, for existing. Whether it's for being strong, for being intense, for wanting more, for saying no. Last week's episode, Primero Yo, Me First, was all about setting boundaries, about reminding ourselves that choosing ourselves isn't selfish. So today we're going a step further, because choosing yourself is good, but not apologizing for doing it, that's a whole other level. So today's episode is called Aquí no se pide perdón, we don't apologize here. Do you know how many times we say sorry when we don't even need to? Sorry, I'm late, traffic was crazy. Sorry for bothering you. Sorry, can I ask you a question? Sorry, but I don't agree. And little by little, we erase ourselves. We shrink to fit into spaces that were never made for our greatness. And today, I want to invite you to look in the mirror and say, we don't apologize here. Not for your voice, not for your story, and not for your fire. And like many, I grew up in a culture where humility was confused with silence, where being well-behaved meant being invisible, and where we learned to apologize for everything. For crying, for laughing loudly, for having an opinion, for being ambitious, for not wanting to carry the weight of the whole world. But you know what? Not anymore. Because apologizing for being yourself is a quiet form of betrayal, and we didn't come here for that. We came to break patterns, heal generations, and remind the world that our existence doesn't need permission. So you know what to do. Get comfortable, grab your coffee, your cafecito, your glass of wine, or a cold beer, and get ready to chismear with me. So first I want to tell you a story, one of those stories that might seem small, but change something inside of you. And it was a few years ago. I was in a work meeting, one of those meetings where everyone tries to look very professional, calm, and composed. And I remember that I was speaking with passion, as always, heart first, explaining something I just really truly believed in. And I remember that suddenly someone interrupts me and gives me that like half uncomfortable smile, and they say, "Jessica, you're a little too much." And there it was, silence, that heavy silence, the kind of silence where normally you shrink, lower your voice, and say sorry. But this time it was completely different. And without thinking, I looked at them straight in the eyes and I said, "Yeah, you're right, I am. And that's exactly why I'm here." And I remember their face. They did not know what to say. They went silent. They looked uncomfortable, as if they couldn't understand how a woman could say that without lowering her gaze. And even though it was a small moment, for me, it was gigantic. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't apologize for my fire. I didn't apologize for my intensity. And I didn't apologize for feeling deeply, speaking loudly, and filling in the space with my voice. And that was my silent revolution. One of those revolutions nobody sees, but you can feel. And from that day, I started noticing all the times I had made myself small before. All the times that I had apologized for things that didn't need an apology, such as laughing too loudly, for interrupting unintentionally, for having an opinion, for not having one, for being emotional, for not being emotional enough. And I realized something painful. My whole life, I had been editing myself, cutting pieces of me so that others could feel comfortable. And how many times has that happened to you? That time you bit your tongue because speaking up would make someone uncomfortable. That time you said yes when your whole body screamed no. That time you said I'm sorry just to keep the peace. Or that time you pretended to be fine so no one would worry. Do you remember how it felt? It's kind of like a knot in your throat, right? That feeling of betraying a little bit of yourself. So today I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself honestly, what are you still apologizing for? For being sensitive? For being strong? For having changed? For no longer being the person everyone expected you to be? Because you don't have to apologize for that. You don't have to apologize for evolving, for healing, for letting go. You don't have to apologize for the new version of yourself that is learning not to shrink anymore. So the next time someone tells you you're too much, look at them and think, too much, yes. Too alive, too free, too me. Because the world needs more people who dare to be too much without apologizing. People who speak from the heart, even if their voice shakes. People who understand that there is nothing more powerful than being a human who no longer apologizes for their light. And that will be your moment of your silent revolution, just like mine. And if you think about it, we were taught to apologize for existing with strength, for speaking loudly, for being hungry for life, for taking up space, for dreaming beyond what others thought possible. And from childhood, we were taught with a single word, be quiet. We were told, don't be too intense. Be humble, lower your voice, let others speak, and little by little we disappeared. Women were told, be grateful, don't complain, be good, be sweet, be quiet. And when we raised our voice, they called us hysterical. And when we said what we wanted, they called us selfish. When we loved ourselves, they called us vain. So we were taught to take care of everyone else but ourselves, to hold up the world with tired arms, to smile even when our hearts were breaking. Men were told to, don't cry, be strong. A man doesn't feel, a man is strong. And just like that, they took away their ability to cry, to heal, to speak of pain. They cut off all tenderness. They stole the freedom to be human. And those who dreamed bigger than what was acceptable, those who wanted to break molds, those who felt differently, loved differently, thought differently were told, don't exaggerate, don't stand out, don't think so highly of yourself. And so all of us, we were all taught this, we were turned into smaller versions of what we could have been. We were taught to ask permission to be ourselves, to live apologizing for being too human. But this podcast exists to break that. And here, you don't need permission. Here, the volume of your voice or the depth of your tears doesn't need any measuring. Here, it's okay to cry without explanation. It's okay to change without notice. It's okay to start over as many times as necessary. It's okay to be fire, water, chaos, calm. It's okay to be big. Here, it's okay to be tired. It's okay not to know who you are yet. And it's okay to let go of what no longer fits. And it's okay to say enough. And it's okay to say it still hurts, because being big is not a flaw. It's a reminder that you're alive, that you feel, that you create, and that you care. They made us believe that apologizing was humility, but many times, apologizing for being yourself is a silent way of giving your power to someone else. And you were not born to live on your knees. You were born to walk with your heart held high, scars and all. Because when you apologize for being you, when you apologize for feeling, for existing, for desiring, you give someone else power over your story. And no one deserves that much power over your voice. You are the author, the heart, the ink, and the pages of your own book. And your story deserves to be told in full. With the beautiful parts and the parts that hurt. With the times you said yes and when you wanted to say no. With the times you broke and started again. Your story doesn't need editing. It doesn't need approval, and it doesn't need permission. You are the author, and this is your chapter of freedom. So here, we don't apologize. Here we breathe, we cry, we heal, and we live. And here, above all, we start again. And if you listen to the previous episode of Primero Yo, Me First, you know that the first step is recognizing yourself. Recognizing who you truly are, beneath everything they told you should be. Beneath expectations, labels, that you have to and that you shouldn't. The first step is looking at yourself without fear, seeing yourself whole, with what you love and what you still haven't forgiven yourself for, with what you show and what you hide. And recognizing yourself isn't just looking in the mirror and saying, I love myself. It's seeing yourself on your good days and on the days that you don't even recognize yourself. It's accepting that you're not always okay, and yet you still deserve love, respect, and rest. That's the first step. The bravest act, seeing yourself honestly and without judgment. But the second step, that's the hardest one, because the second step is not apologizing for it. Because once you start recognizing yourself, you're going to make people uncomfortable. And that's something that you can't change. When you start saying, I don't want this anymore, when you start setting boundaries, when you stop carrying what isn't yours, or when you choose your peace over drama, or when you give yourself permission to rest, to say no, to shine, someone will always tell you that you've changed. And yes, you have. You've grown, you've healed, you've awakened, and you don't have to apologize for that. The world doesn't always know what to do with someone who loves themselves. With a woman who no longer asks for permission, with a man who allows himself to cry, or with someone who chooses to live freely and not feel guilt. When you stop apologizing for recognizing yourself, you break the cycle of shame that generations before you carried in silence. You become the link that breaks the chain, the voice that says it ends here. And I know it hurts because guilt is like a shadow that follows you even when you know you owe no one anything. But listen to this. Every time you choose not to apologize for being you, you teach the world how to treat you. You teach your children, your friends, your community that loving yourself is not arrogance, that putting yourself first is not selfish, that saying no is also love. The first step is recognizing yourself, and the second is defending that recognition with everything you have. It's not lowering your head when others don't understand your process. It's not explaining yourself 1,000 times for approval. And it's not apologizing for no longer being the version of yourself that pleased everyone but you. Because recognizing yourself and not apologizing for it is like planting your feet in the ground and saying, I'm here, and I'm no longer hiding. So if you already taken the first step, if you started recognizing yourself, today I invite you to take the second. To not apologize for existing, for speaking loudly, for healing slowly, for changing your mind, for not having everything figured out, for being real. Because recognizing yourself saves you, but not apologizing for it sets you free. And there's a story that marked me when I started this career in social work, and it was one that changed the way that I looked at pain. And it was a few years ago, I was supporting a survivor of domestic violence, a woman with such a deep gaze that you could really see in her eyes everything she had lived through and everything she had kept silent. And I remember that we were sitting together in silence. We were waiting for her court hearing to start. And after a while, she just looked at me and said, and her voice was trembling when she said this, "For a long time, I thought I had to apologize for not leaving sooner." And that sentence pierced my soul. Because in her words, I heard the voices of so many people who have learned to carry guilt that doesn't belong to them. And in that moment, I understood that many of us live apologizing for doing what we had to survive. We apologize for not leaving sooner, for going back, for trusting, for being afraid, for staying silent. And we apologize for the time it took us to heal, for the times we didn't have the strength, for still feeling pain when everyone expected us to be fine. But tell me, since when did surviving become something we have to apologize for? You don't have to apologize for doing the best you could with what you had at that time. You don't have to apologize for protecting yourself, for choosing silence when speaking up was dangerous, or for hiding in order to stay alive. Sometimes we forget that survival is also a form of resistance. That every decision you made was a way to keep going, even when the world didn't understand it. And yes, maybe you didn't leave when others thought you should have. Maybe you trusted again. Maybe you made mistakes. Maybe fear paralyzed you. But that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. It makes you a survivor. And it makes you someone who chose to live, even if it was in pieces. And you have nothing to apologize for. You survived, you learned, and you grew. And that deserves respect, not apologies. Because as I've said in other episodes, healing is not linear. There will be days when you feel free and others when the past pulls you back. And still, every step counts. Every tear you wiped on your own. Every time you got up when no one was watching. And every time you chose to keep going. And all of that is courage. So if you ever thought you had to apologize for how you survived, I'll tell you from the heart, you don't have to. You don't have to apologize for finding your way to stay alive. The world should be grateful that you're still here, that you still have hope, and that you still carry fire in your heart. And if you're listening today, maybe it's time to let go of that apology that has weighted you so heavily, to look at your story with tenderness, not with guilt, to say it to yourself in the mirror. I have nothing to apologize for. I have everything to be grateful for. Because yes, you survived, and that is already a form of victory. And as always, I want to leave you with a book that has accompanied me in the process of learning not to apologize for existing. A book that really reminded me that even in the darkest moments, the light is always there, waiting for us to look toward it again. And the book is called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and it's a book that can hurt, that confronts, but also rebuilds. And he's a psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor, and he shares his experience in a concentration camp and how, despite the horror, he discovered that humans can find meaning even in suffering. And this book doesn't just talk about pain, it speaks to the infinite capacity that we have to choose how we respond to it, to how even when we cannot control what happens to us, we can decide who we want it to be in the face of it. And that precisely is the heart of this episode, stopping the habit of apologizing for surviving your way, for healing at your own pace, for continuing to seek meaning when everything seems lost. So if you're in that process, if you're rebuilding, and if you're learning to stop apologizing for your story, I invite you to read Man's Search for Meaning. We were not born to apologize. We were born to light the way. We were born to be a voice where there was once silence, to be the roots where there was once fear, to be the light even when the world tries to extinguish us. They taught us to apologize for existence, but in reality, we came to remind the world that being alive is already an act of resistance. So this week, I leave you with a task. I want you to really notice how many times you say sorry when it isn't necessary. And each time you do, pause, breathe, smile a little, and replace it with a thank you. So instead of saying, "Sorry, I'm late," say, "Thank you for waiting for me." Instead of saying, "Sorry for talking so much," say, "Thank you for listening to me." Or instead of saying, "Sorry for being this way," say, "Thank you for accepting me." Language matters, and it matters so much. And every word you choose can be a seed or a wound, a caress or a change, an apology that shrinks you or a gratitude that expands you. So you decide which one to plant. You decide how to tell your story. You decide whether your voice hides or blossoms. And before I go, I want you to remember something. The world needs more people who live without apologizing for their light. More women who say, I will not shrink to make others comfortable. More men to say, I am not afraid to feel. More people who embrace their story, their identity, and their fire. We need more brave souls who say out loud, I won't stay quiet, I won't hide, and I won't apologize for who I am. Because when you stop apologizing for your power, you give others permission to do the same. When you choose to see yourself with love, you inspire someone else to stop living with guilt. When you speak truth, you open up a space for others to speak too. And little by little, we heal the world. Not from perfection, not from ego, but from compassion. Not from constant apology, but from gratitude, presence, and love. So today, make yourself a promise. Do not apologize for existing with intensity, for laughing loudly, for dreaming big, for crying when you need to, for taking up space. Promise yourself that you won't apologize for your story, for your wounds, or for your voice. Because the world doesn't need a smaller version of you. It needs exactly who you are. You are light. You are fire. You are part of the change. And you were not born to apologize. You were born to shine. As always, in the description of this episode, you'll find the link to the book I mentioned. And remember, every Friday there's a new episode. Before we say goodbye, I want to give you a sneak peek of the next episode called Soy el grito que no quieren oír. I am the scream they don't want to hear. This week, we talked about stopping the habit of apologizing for being yourself, for surviving, or for taking up space. Next week, we'll take it a step further. We'll talk about being the scream that breaks the silence, the voice that many try to ignore, but that refuses to be silenced. We'll explore claiming space where we were told we couldn't be, confronting criticism, and using our strength to live and work without shrinking, without apologies, and without fear. It will be an episode about anger, power, and freedom, about transforming frustration and rage into the strength to claim your voice and your truth. And if this week you learn to stop apologizing for existing, next week you'll discover how to be the scream that no one can ignore. As always, thank you for listening, for being here, and for choosing yourself once again. And remember, here we don't apologize. Here we breathe freedom. You were listening to No Me Callo, I Won't Stay Quiet. I'm your host, Jessica Lomelin. Until next time.